Hey, everybody, this is Dr. Sophia, and thank you so much for coming to another episode of Sex in the Bowl City and Queen City Healthy Sex. And I am super excited today to talk to one of my new friends here in Charlotte, Chris Weedon with Mentally Shredded. And I'm just happy to be with you again today, Chris. I know we did a podcast with you for your site a couple of months ago, and that was really nice and that was fun. We got into a lot of good stuff. And I know we are today here as well. And so, just for our listeners, just as a reminder, a lot of the things that I talk about are relationships, addiction, sex, and connection. And I feel like Chris and his organization, Mentally Shredded, fit really well with the things that I'm interested in and the things that I'm interested in sharing about and talking about, because I got really interested in Chris's organization just by a happenstance meeting last year. And first, the name drew me in because it's just really a killer, kick ass name. It really is. Mentally Shredded. I was like, oh, dang, why didn't I think of that a long time ago? But I had to know what was going on here. And I had a feeling that there was something that had to do with not just mental health and well-being, but I had a feeling there was something physical as well going on with the shredded word. And pleasantly, when I talked with you, Chris, I was happy to learn that, yeah, you and your interests and your organization, your foundation of Mentally Shredded, you're really trying to bridge that gap between mental, emotional, and physical health, well-being, and connection. And I'm just, excited to talk with you. But I was so enthralled by what you're growing that I wanted to get involved. So just to let everybody know, I'm also hoping to be more involved with Mentally Shredded, but am officially an advisor, and I'm proud and happy to be a part of this. I think really groundbreaking area. So welcome, Chris, and I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I gave just kind of a very brief snippet, not very detailed, about what you're doing with Mentally Shredded and kind of what your vision is, what your thoughts are and hopes and dreams. But can you just share like whatever's coming up for you right now? Um, where does this come from? What are you hoping to really get out there, and who are you hoping to impact? And we'll just kind of see where this conversation takes us.
Absolutely. Well, I'll share the short-term and long-term goals of the organization, and then I can share what led us here. So, short term, the goal is to expand our programs globally, right?
Mm.
So, I have this vision of hosting programs on each and every continent. Yes, you heard that right. Every continent, including Antarctica, for those of you that are like, wait a second. So I don't believe that there are limitations. The limitations are in our mind. And so recently we hosted our first in person international event in the UK. It was a success. In fact, the owner of the facility we hosted that program at just reached out to me this morning and said, when's the next one? So
Mm.
if that says anything, um, we are invited back, and I tend to find that that happens anytime that we are invited into a space. The feedback has been positive, and so that's the goal. We blend mental and physical wellness. You were spot on with Mentally Shredded, and with the RX program specifically, that's a workout combined with a mental health discussion. And so you mentioned this on my show, but it's really the gold standard in preventative care. I stole that from you, so thank you for sharing that. And long term, the goal is to have one-stop shop facilities. So a brick and mortar where people can go and they can receive services, they can move their body, they can get their work done, right? Without giving too much information about what that facility will look like and actually do. But that is the goal long term.
That sounds really nice. I mean, what I'm really hearing you talk about is, kind of the easy way um, to make a lifestyle change, and lifestyle change not being just, oh, I'm gonna drink more water, and I'm gonna go out and walk 3 times a week, or I'm gonna stop eating potato chips. But lifestyle meaning that the work, life, health, and personal parts of us can all fit together. There's room for everything.
Absolutely. It's a holistic approach, right? And getting back to what I mentioned earlier, well, in order for you to even care about what we're doing, having an understanding of why we are doing it is important, right? So, as somebody who performed at a very high level in soccer, went on to achieve some pretty cool things, but I always had performance anxiety since freshman year of high school. I suffered depression in college, and then later in life found myself struggling with anxiety, depression, and eventually burnout in my corporate career. And so everything that we are doing is by design. It's giving back tools that I've learned through therapy, through application, really, and everything that helped me rebuild my foundation. We've now grown into a program to serve others.
Yeah, I love that. So much of what I do professionally these days certainly is born out of my own personal hardships and growth, having to move through that and survive, and figure it out and come out better on the other side. And that sounds a little bit about what you were just saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and in that there were so many different ways of coping, right? The name of your show, something came up in me when you were just doing the intro, and I was like, man, you know, the person I am today is not who started this journey, right? The person that started this journey was seeking, vices and coping mechanisms in places that ultimately I knew wasn't going to get me the results I wanted, but it was a temporary satisfaction, a temporary hit that, in the moment you're like, is what it is. But long term, I knew it was moving me further away from my goal. And so I am grateful for the tools that we have in our arsenal.
Yeah, tools are good. Tools are really good. Tell us a little bit about, and for me, I'm selfishly asking some of these questions because I'm still new to learning about mentally shredded. But tell us a little bit about. I'm curious. I love what you're talking about. Boy, I love what you said about your our limits are in our mind, and that's certainly true. But I'm curious. I really want to hear what you were just doing in the UK, and I think a lot of people would be really interested in hearing about that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we were fortunate to host our signature program, which I mentioned earlier is RX, right? And so a gym owner reached out in the right outside Bath, and so very beautiful rural area, a lot of farmland out there, and so that gym was called Rustic Fitness, and we spoke about inviting his gym members to participate, right? And so that's what we did. We invited his gym members, and we did a workout. I wrote a workout that was catered for his community, And that's the beautiful thing about it. I'm the one that designs the workout for each and every event. So I look at the crowd and I assess, okay, they're probably going to be able to do X, and let's do that. And so we did that. And what I love about hosting these events is there's always something unexpected that happens. One of the things I do expect is for people to hit a wall, because the purpose of RX is to challenge the body and empower the mind, which means, yes, the workout is going to become difficult because at some point, something is going to come up for you that's going to say, hey, we should quit, or hey, this hurts. And once you're able to, especially with how I communicate, because once that starts happening, I can tell. I can look around the room. I'm like, all right, they're starting to hit a wall. Then I start to just shout out, think about what you're thinking about, and I just put little teasers in, and then automatically, from what I've heard, this is the feedback I've been given. There's a shift that happens. They start thinking about business or their families or all these things that help them continue to move forward. And recently, here in Wilmington, North Carolina, that happened at one of our pop-ups, and the lady was like, I wanted to quit. And when I thought about it, when you said think about what you're thinking about, I thought about, if I quit now, it may lead to me quitting my business. She said, I don't want to quit my business. And so I stayed in. And in the UK, that same thing happened. A lady hit her breaking point. She was getting frustrated. She wanted to throw down the jump rope. And she was like, at that moment, I just wanted to start crying. She said, I did. I felt the emotions coming. And what that did for me is, when you were talking, I gathered myself and I jumped back in. And that was how I want to show up in life, because it's going to get difficult. But will I have the courage to just jump back in? And that is the stuff that you can't make that stuff up, right? Like, I tell people, it's sometimes it's hard for me to explain what we do at our in-person events. The best way to show you is for me to bring it to you and for you to show up and experience it.
I am so glad I asked that question. And so that was really impactful for me. Next time you're in Wilmington, let me know. I will come. I've got an office there and a place there. And so I'd love to come and be part of it, and do some kind of, mental health something or other to add in there. That's amazing. So, what I'm hearing is, really two or three different things. But the first thing I'm going to say is, you are identifying and describing the power of hitting the wall. There's
Absolutely.
so much power in hitting the wall.
How
And,
often do you get to that,
yeah,
right?
how often do I get to that? I,
To even the person listening, you
I
or
yeah,
anybody listening.
I think if we're being honest, I mean, honestly, if we're all being honest, I think there's a lot of places we probably hit the wall. And I think a lot of us have gotten used to kind of numbing out and squishing down those feelings and thoughts. And so we power through, which is different than hitting the wall. So hitting the wall, the way you're describing it and kind of the work that I do, it's a conscious place of, oh shit, I'm hitting the wall, or I want to give up, or I don't know what to do. I don't know. Like in therapy, I don't know is actually a really powerful place to be. So hitting the wall, is there's power just beyond the wall. And I love that when people are hitting the wall, the therapist in me hears, when people hit the wall, you make the reach and create a connection. And that's what helps people go through the wall and go beyond. And that to me is like, that is the combination of, that is mentally shredded right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, to me, I wish we could duplicate this into every gym. While I don't believe that's possible because we're human, right? And so we have our own vision for how we run our practices, our businesses, etc. However, for me, I'm used to challenging myself physically. That's not actually the difficult part. Hitting the wall every time, that can be difficult because you don't. I'm not telling you you need to go 100% every day in the gym every week. That's not what I'm saying. But every now and then, test yourself a little bit more, right? That's what I'm saying, right? Can do you have the the type of attitude to say, okay, I'm going to show up today, and can I just add a little bit more weight, or can I go just a little bit longer, right? Get out of the routine because I think what I've seen is we like to follow plans and stick to these schedules and so on and so forth. Life doesn't care about your schedule, right? Life is going to start lifing, and you just switching things up and doing an extra rep or going a little longer than you expected just gets you out of that routine, even for a moment. That way, when life does happen, you can say, you know what, that was unexpected, but I know I can handle it.
That's nice. Another good example of, teaching the brain and nervous system to have that flexible brain. Like, yeah, we can do that in the gym. The gym can be a part of that, or any exercise routine. And you're right. So much, so much of what we see people do in the gym is kind of like a regimen, and people do kind of get stuck in their ruts. And old school, you know they're switching it up every like 4 weeks, every 6 weeks. It's a total switch up. And that's I think we all, I think that's a really great thing you're talking about, because you're right, that does lead us to the place of having a more flexible brain to be able to deal with life on life's terms. We have very little control in this life, and so once we can realize that and kind of just roll with it, like when we talked about what are we going to talk about on the podcast? I don't know. Let's just see what happens. And so it's kind of that kind of thing. Like we're both just like, all right, let's just do this, record.
Yeah,
So yeah. Okay. I'm so glad I asked about that. And I love what you're describing. You know, there's an interesting parallel here between hitting the wall physically and in the work I do with intimacy and connection. That happens all the time, hitting the wall emotionally. And so what we do is, when we're in that intensive work, I work with people for 4 and 8 hours at a time, no breaks except to go to the bathroom. And people are exhausted. They're definitely crying. They want to stop. And the more we keep going, we're building that intimacy tolerance. And it's really not any different than what you're talking about. Is we don't have to hit the wall every time. Certainly every therapy session's not an intensive. Just like in the gym, you're not going to hit the wall every time. That's not healthy, actually. And so, but to be there in that place of hitting the wall and having you reach out, let them know that they're not alone in that place, that connection is really, really powerful, and that is different than powering through. Does that make sense?
100%,
Yeah.
100%.
It's like a
Yeah,
connection it's like you're walking with them through.
that's it. Yeah, One, the interesting thing here is when you go to therapy, and I'm grateful for my therapist that helped me when I was at my lowest point, but he gave me the keys to the car. So I got to drive. I didn't know that's what therapy was. I just assumed, okay, they're driving and I'm just, taking what I can and then I go on about my life. He was like, no, here's the keys. I'm going to sit in the passenger seat. So if you're going in the wrong direction, I can help guide you back on the right path, right? The reason why that model resonated with me so much is because, again, going back to I'm a former athlete, your coach couldn't go in the game for you, but they gave you the tools throughout the week when you were training to help when to help you actually when game day did come, you knew how to perform, you knew how to show up. And so when it comes to intimacy, that we could go a few different directions, but I'll speak from a vulnerable place. Most recently, I have taken all of my experiences of dating, right? And leading up to this year, I said, you know what? I have been getting the same results. That's insanity by doing the same thing over and over again. I don't want to do that anymore. And so this year, I said, I'm going to show up differently this year. I'm going to date with intention of being the person I need to be for my partner, whoever she may be, right? And so I courted one person this whole year. That was it. And things didn't work out, which is fine. That's not the point. The point is I stayed true to who I said I wanted to be this whole time. It's October. 10 months of just being intentional, 10 months of staying true to habits that I knew I could live out because I had done it up till 18, right? But it was different doing it at 36. And I have, with a child, right? It's different when you say, well, this is actually the standard I want to keep, and I know that this is going to respect my future wife. So I'm going to start operating as if I'm being prepared for her daily in my walk and in my connection with others. And so I hope that when people hear the intimacy piece, obviously if they're working with you and when it comes to intimacy, my intimacy grew for myself throughout this process, which now allows me to show up the way that I need to for others.
That is huge, Chris, because and I do want to get back to talking about whatever you want to get into about mentally shredded, but 100% we don't have a hope and a prayer of connecting with someone else really deeply, and significantly and in a fulfilling manner if we're not fully connected with ourselves first. And with you describing of whether you're dating or not, but going through your days of being fully intentional and you showing up and who you really are, um, that strengthens you. So that kind of the way I think about it, and I have a really cool dating plan that I'll tell you about sometime offline. But the way I think about it is when we're single, we are actually preparing ourselves for our perfect match. And how many perfect matches are there out there? Well, we don't have one or two soulmates. We have about a million. So there's a lot of soulmates out there, that really are a perfect match, to be perfectly honest. And so, while you are dating or not dating, stepping, it's so great to hear you talking about being that same self, because that strengthens the man that you are, and then you will be calling in the right match, and that's really what it's all about. So I love that you brought up dating, and yeah, I think there's so many parallels in, um, mental health and physical health. And it doesn't mean we have to all be professional athletes, because I certainly am not, but I sure love trying to be healthy. I still want to eat my pizza, but
Oh,
but you
absolutely.
know yeah, there's different levels of what we're willing and not willing to do. But it's there's definitely so many parallels there of stepping into the fullness of who you really are. It's not really who you want to be, I don't think, or who someone can be. I think it's really who someone actually is inside. We just have to find that and actually live it.
Yeah, well, so you mentioned, well, okay, so the listener can be able to relate this back to Mentally Shredded. The sole purpose for me with just the brand itself was to reclaim my power. And that was
Mm.
over anything that I had given my power away to. So whether that was vices, alcohol, drugs, women, whatever it was, for you, I know what it was for me. And so I just kept giving my power away. Mentally Shredded was like a lifeline for me when I saw it and I put it on a shirt and I was like, wait a second. Chris, you do this in the gym already. Why would you not do this for your mind? Like, why would you not try to figure out how can you be the best version of yourself today? And know that, to be fair, if I knew how hard the journey was to get here, I may have chosen something different. But it was so worth it, and I don't regret it at all. And so the beautiful tie with Mentally Shredded regarding any area of your life that you are facing difficulty or a challenge in is you're bridging the gap from where you are to where you want to be. That's Mentally Shredded. The double entendre of I am so broken down mentally, like I'm that shredded version where it's just I don't know if I can take this anymore. Two, I've done the work. I have the tools now. And eventually I grew into being the mentally shredded version of myself that when I look in the mirror, I'm proud of who's looking back.
I love that. I don't think you've ever told me that. And I'm so glad that you explained that to us and for everybody to really hear. Um, I do want to ask you, do you think it's true? I mean, I'm not asking this from like a medical or scientific, place, but do you find through yourself and other people that that when we are physically active, that our mental health really is improved? Like, do you find that anxiety really kind of decreases, that we actually can feel better in other ways? And I just kind of want to hear from you, having so much experience being physically active and around physically active people. I mean, what are your thoughts there? I mean, again, this is not a scientific question. It's more like a life experience question.
So yes and no. And the reason I can say that is because when I was at my lowest point, I worked out 7 days a week. But that was because I was escaping, right? There was no purpose behind it other than get big, get as big as possible, be fast, be as fast as possible. Who cares about your problems, right? That's one version. Honestly, that version can't hold water with the version I am today.
Yeah.
The difference is I started processing, okay, why are you going this hard? What is going on for you? I just started asking myself different questions, and so to answer your question, yes, when you move your body, positive endorphins and the science behind it is there, right? But you feel better overall. And to me, the caveat is the intention. What is your intention going into it? Because if my intention is just to escape, more often than not, maybe my body feels a positive response, but my brain is still where it was before. And so I needed to switch that for myself. So now, in that season, I couldn't go for a walk and be like, walking made zero sense to me. When people were like, "Oh, let's just go for a walk," and I'd be like, "For what?" No, like walking, I couldn't wrap my head around walking and feeling better. Couldn't do it. Now I can go for walks. I can, you know, but what's funny, if I'm going to process something, if I literally am, it could be business, relational, whatever it is, I'll go for a run more often than not. And that just gives me time alone. It gives me time with God, whatever your beliefs are. Like I do a lot of prayer. I do a lot of stuff when it's just me. No one's out there with me. And so I can just process everything. I always feel better after doing that. But that's because my mindset around why I'm doing things has changed.
Yeah. And then also, as just a little tip, walking and running is bilateral stimulation on the brain, which helps us process through. So that's also why it feels good. So that makes a lot of sense. So what you were describing, the way I heard you answer that was, um, yes, exercise is helpful when we are using it in a healthy way that's purposeful and intentional, um, that's helpful. And then there's these other ways that how we get to burnout is when we're kind of crushing it every single day that we're exercising or that we're in the gym or that we're lifting or that we're doing whatever. We're going to burn out. And that's similar to, what I do a lot of work with is professionals who experience brain burnout, because we can have brain burnout, from anything, from being a parent to being a student to being a worker to, some kind of physical, that kind of mindless numbing out, like rigorous exercise that's sort of, you're just kind of doing it at that point. um, and I know that for mentally shredded, burnout prevention is that's a really important part of your mission. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Burnout prevention, if I had the tools that I have today, I don't know that I would have left corporate in the manner that I
Mm.
did. I think eventually I was always called to run my own business. I always felt that, but I think I would have stayed in a little longer, right?
Mm.
But I didn't have the tools. And when I spoke up, no one provided me with the tools. And so I didn't know what to do. So eventually, a panic attack, all it took was one for me. And there are people that may listen to this right now who've had multiple this year. It took one for me to be like, here's my 2 weeks. I can't do this because it was either I need to prioritize my well being so I can show up the way that I know that I was called to show up, or I'm going to just give my life away to this company and they'll replace me after I drop dead. Right. And not to be, it's kind of dark, but we're human. We're like machines. Once once the expiration date hits, we don't recover, right? And so I just knew that I had to prioritize myself. I had to put myself first, probably for the first time in a very long time. And that goes back to, I try not to use the oxygen mask reference, so I'm going to use the filling the cup because that's a long story. But fill your cup so that the overflow is pouring into others. That's what I had to do.
Yeah, I think that's for most of us, we don't know what burnout is until we get there. That's such a great part of what your mission is here with mentally shredded. And because burnout does happen everywhere, and it's we don't have to be living a very fast or, kind of snazzy life to experience brain burnout or anything related to that. So it's definitely something that I think we see more today, probably than we ever have. Maybe that's just my 2 cents, but I think when we have things like the internet, we can work 24/7. People can always reach us. We really can't get off the grid that easily at this point. So we have to be super intentional. And if we're not doing that, and if we work at a place that doesn't sort of foster our wellness in that way, it's actually really easy to get there. So I think you and I probably see a lot of the same things in different people, and I think that's just a really important part of what you're doing. Anything else that you want to share or get into before we sign off?
The main thing is if you're listening to this, right, you have a professional that is speaking, and then you have somebody that people are saying now that I'm becoming an expert in the space, right? So you can take our advice or not, but I know that there's something greater that you are supposed to be doing. And until you actually heal, until you actually show up and do the work, you're going to continue to hit those walls and be met with that resistance. And I know this because that's what I was doing. I kept trying to figure out a way to go around the trauma, like I really, because I didn't want to face it. I really felt like I could just get to where I wanted to be without having to deal with it and address it. The problem is I was still taking me with me everywhere I went. And that me couldn't go with me now, right? It couldn't show up in rooms with me now. And I know we're this show, Queen City Healthy Sex and Relationships, right? Like majority of my audience is 90% women. I couldn't have shown up in this space before, not the way that I do now, because I was not, I'm not, I wasn't the person I am today, right? I was chasing certain things. And to me, the beautiful thing about having the relationship that I did this year was I learned before this, but I got to test it this year. I learned how to protect someone's heart without the mess. And so if it doesn't work out, you're able to walk away and there's no hard feelings, right? But the hurt me, the person that was still taking me everywhere, if I was showing up as the person I was before in the space I'm in now, the business would have crumbled a long time ago. Just to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And, just as a recap of that, like the more secure we are here, the more secure and safe we're going to be in our relationships, whether they're new relationships, old relationships, they work out, they don't. Secure, content people can part as friends and even have no hard feelings if the other one, is being ugly. And it's more like, the more I've done this work, it's about like we're just not the right match. And that's kind of no harm, no foul. But you stepping into, kind of the way I think about it in my field is the wall is really, it's usually fear. And people spend decades of their lives trying to go around the fear, over it. How can I outsmart the fear? How can I lie my way through the fear? And I'm like, we got to go right into that thing. And we got to stay in it, go through it as long as it takes. And that's so much of what I heard you say. And I'm just, I'm really excited. Every time I talk with you, I'm more excited. I just want to say, I love your jacket with Mentally Shredded written on it. you guys, everyone, there's actually like a little shopping section on the website. Like, go to that, buy some merch, and I'm certainly going to do that. And I'm just excited for our next conversations, and for how I can help, and how we can help grow this mission. It's just really important. Chris, thanks so much for being with us today. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.